Well, I was lucky enough to grow up in a small town up in the mountains up in East Tennessee that was really kind of like Mayberry, you might as well say. It was um, a very simple world back then. We started off with no TV set and played outside in the neighborhood every afternoon and that kind of thing. So it was a wonderful place to grow up. And uh, fortunate to have had very loving parents who were very inspirational to me and uh, gave me great upbringing and great advice. My dad was a chemical engineer, worked for an Eastman Kodak plant, and my mom started off as a church secretary, but ended up being a full-time mom, was great for us. Went to elementary school at uh, Andrew Johnson Elementary School, went to high school at Dobbins Bennett High School, graduated in 1964, went to Southwestern at Memphis, now Rhodes College, started there after high school, and then started LSU Law School in 1967 and graduated in 1970. I found out I was not that good at math and science, as I perhaps had more talent in other areas, and started thinking about things, and just something clicked when I was in high school. I said, practicing law ought to be a really interesting thing to do. And so I kind of got that in my brain. I said, well, I'm going to a liberal arts school. I'll get a little bit of everything. I'll be a good background for that. And the more I thought about it, the more I wanted to pursue that. So ended up making that decision and following those paths to get there. But I guess the funny thing to me about law school was that you were hitting so many different angles, and all of a sudden the third year, and I don't know why they didn't think about maybe altering how they taught it, but they had a course in civil procedure. And for some reason things started clicking, like succession law made sense to me at that point. Torts law seemed to make more sense to me. But just how did you physically do stuff? And that was quite an enlightening thing. So if I had to pick one, I'd say that was the best one as far as being the most helpful to me. After law school, I was fortunate to get with a law firm in Denham Springs, and it was quite an education because one of the partners in the firm, and there were four partners and I was an associate, but one of the partners at that time was a guy named Karl Kavanaugh, who up to that time had the highest grade point average that anyone had ever made at LSU Law School. So he was like a walking encyclopedia, but Karl would never tell you what to do. Karl would say, do this, and make you try, and then after you'd thought through it, you could come to him with some questions, and of course he didn't ever have to open a book to give you the answer to it. And at that time, Paul Dewey was a partner in the firm, and Paul was just an absolutely brilliant trial lawyer, so you got a good mix of a lot of different things. Had been doing work with the law firm for both a bank and a savings and loan association, and they both stuck with me and did a lot of real estate work at that point. And then the father of our present clerk of court here in Livingston Parish was into real estate and got all of his business, and he was very good to me too. So it was a good base, and then I could kind of pay the bills with that and pick up a little bit of different kind of stuff on the side. So I was lucky. Calvin and I had been friends and acquaintances for some time, and at that point I was practicing by myself and enjoying that, and kind of got to know Jimmy Coon through Calvin. And so we got to hatching up a scheme about, maybe we could start a partnership, and it was a good mix because, as I've said, my practice was heavily into commercial type of business law and real estate and that kind of thing. And so we had plaintiff's work, we had insurance defense, we had either Calvin or Jimmy at one time or another was the assistant district attorney for Livingston Parish, and so had criminal work, but on top of that, that brought in some municipal work because the district attorney had supplied representation to a lot of the smaller municipalities, so ended up learning some of that law too. After Calvin and Jimmy and I had formed our partnership, for years the Bar Association had their annual meeting every year in Biloxi. And one of the presidents who was coming along had said, well, we need to broaden our horizons, so decided to have the Bar Association meeting in Las Vegas. And they both wanted to go, and I was not really able to at that time, so I stayed home. And had the windows open. It was a cool morning, and woke up with this huge boom. I said, I wonder what that is, and got to work, and about the time I got to work, the phone started ringing, and they said, there's a train that's derailed and we need to file a class action suit. Go do that immediately. And I said, what's a class action suit? I had no idea, and of course back then there weren't that many. So I don't know where I got some form that kind of cobbed together to try to get this done and get it out and get it filed. And of course that was a kind of wild experience dealing with the management of that and trying to help. And but it ended up being a big case and kind of a precedent setter in a lot of ways as far as case management and that sort of thing. My judicial career actually kind of started, I guess, by accident. The judge who preceded me in my division was having some health issues and was forced to retire. And he got in touch with me and said, I want you to take my place. Well, I'd never really thought about being a judge, but kind of stuck to me and started appealing to me. And then the word started getting out, and I had some real encouragement by a lot of guys and gals to go and throw my hat in the ring. I had never run for political office, so it was a new experience to me, and it was kind of rat race in that respect because it's a 3-parish district, and you'd go out and try to meet as many people as you could meet and that sort of thing, and you'd come dragging home at night and never feel like you got all the calls returned or saw as many people as you wanted to. But the good part about it was that most people didn't know me, and most people didn't know my opponent, and I got a warm reception everywhere I went because I was the only one who could talk to them and ask them and that kind of thing, and ended up making some friends who I am still in touch with from time to time, although after my first contested race, I was fortunate enough to go in re-elected without opposition ever since then. So I hope that's a compliment. It certainly is easier than having to go out and beat the bushes, but I have done that too. My first day on the bench, and I got elected at the same time as a good friend of mine, Bruce Bennett, was elected, and we got sworn in the morning and went off to work immediately. I went to St. Helena Parish, and Bruce came over to Livingston where he was assigned, and I hadn't been up there long at the courthouse. A fella came up to me and said he really needed help, that they had taken his pet bear cub, and he was very fond of his bear cub. In fact, he pulled his wallet out and he had like a baby picture of his bear cub in there, and just was pleading to get it back. And I said, well, what can be the harm of that? So turned out that the bear cub was in custody in Livingston Parish. So I called Bruce and told him the situation and said, could you please sign this order for this guy to get his bear cub back? And he said, well, I guess so. So he did. He called me shortly after that and said the wildlife and fisheries people were crawling him for violation of whatever rule they had against having wild quadrupeds. And so that was kind of my first case, if you would, of any magnitude in being on the bench. I think Carl Cavanaugh had a lot of influence on me as far as just his knowledge of the law, and he would certainly go down as one of them. Bob Mellon was another partner, and Bob unfortunately just passed away about a week ago, but Bob had the ability to smooth things over, and I think helped me to understand that compromise was often the best way to try to get a legal issue resolved. Movie that came out years ago called Natural Born Killers, and it was a pretty serious, I guess is a mild way to put it, movie that involved a good bit of violence, but there was a young couple, or a young man, a young woman from Oklahoma who apparently claimed to have been inspired by that movie, made a trip to New Orleans, and part of the deal was that he ended up killing somebody in Mississippi on the way down there, and she shot a lady in Ponchatoula on the way back. And so they were sued along with Oliver Stone, who was the producer of the movie, under the theory that the violence in the movie had somehow influenced these young people to commit those acts. And so I ended up having a very interesting First Amendment case at that point, and again, extremely capable lawyers on both sides. In fact, one of the defense lawyers was Jack Weiss, who became the dean of the LSU Law School, but he was still in practice at that point and certainly knew his First Amendment law. So that was another good experience. We desperately needed a new courthouse in Livingston Parish, and I was actively involved with a lot of other good people in being able to get this facility put together. And it's just not only a safe, nicer building, but it's a safer building as far as security and having the capacity to accommodate the caseload that we have out here. So I was really happy to be able to do that as well. By far one of the greatest honors I have had was through the Bar Foundation a couple of years ago, named me as the Calagaro Justice Award winner, and or recipient, not winner, for the that particular year. And I've known so many judges statewide that, and so many, it's not limited to judges, to both attorneys as well, and just so many people that have done so many things. To be in that company is quite an honor, and I would have to say that was one of the things that I felt most honored about. Oh gosh, the way I'd like to be remembered is really the way I would hope if I were a lawyer going in front of a judge to be remembered, and I just hope to be remembered as being fair and being patient and trying to listen to both sides. If I can be remembered like that, that would be the best possible thing in my view.